Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. So, like I said in the teacher message video, what I want to do today is I want to take a look at and go over the packet that we did on Thursday. And I want to take and make sure that we go over the answers and also at the same time have an understanding of what life was like in the Americas after the War of 1812. That's going to kind of set us up for what happens moving forward and help us to understand really how the United States becomes kind of the proud country, confident in itself that it is after the War of 1812, and how that's going to carry the United States into the Civil War, into the 20th century, into the rest of history that you guys are going to study this year and then in eighth grade next year. So what we're going to do, like I said, we're going to take and go over this a little bit. I'm going to talk, set it up, talk a little bit, clarify, summarize some of the different sections, give you the answers, and that should hopefully help us to kind of better understand and get a better idea of this growing sense of nationalism and the presidency of James Monroe and kind of this era of good feelings. So after the War of 1812, as this first section talks about, you really had this growing sense of nationalism. Even though the War of 1812 was a stalemate, the people of the United States felt like they had won the War of 1812. They didn't lose anything, they didn't gain anything, but after the Battle of New Orleans, they saw Andrew Jackson as a hero and kind of took that as a win and kind of a symbol of how the War of 1812 went. So they get a lot of pride in their nation. And also at the same point, when you have the Treaty of 1818, the Rush-Bagot Agreement, the Adams-Onis Treaty, all kind of settling the different disputes that the United States has with its borders, you don't see kind of that uncertainty anymore. The United States knows where its borders are. There are no more disputes over what land the United States controls and what land, say, Great Britain controls or what land Spain controls. So the United States has secured its borders and really established its borders and gotten rid of that uncertainty. At this time, now that, the United States has won the War of 1812 and they've secured their borders, there are politicians in Congress, and we'll talk about this a little bit later at this time during the era of good feelings, that are really trying to take and make sure they strengthen the economy. If you have a strong economy and if your borders are secure and people feel confident that another country is not going to come and attack, you are going to have people that have a lot of pride and have a lot of confidence in their country. So that is where kind of this nationalism and this feeling of pride and loyalty for the United States comes from. Now, I mentioned that congressmen and the government are really going to try to work on after the War of 1812 during this era of good feelings. They're going to try to really take and strengthen the economy. So to answer question number one, how would a growing economy generate good feelings? That's kind of a common sense question. And if you didn't get it, don't worry about it, guys. It's not something that was expressly written in here, specifically written in here. But you kind of have to think about what you know about kind of about life and about how things work in a sense and stuff like that. And if you're not too sure, the stronger the economy is, the more money you might have, the more money you have, the better you feel about your country and about yourself. The less money you have, the weaker the economy is. U.S. citizens are not going to take and feel as confident in their country. So having an economy that is growing and that is strong is going to generate good feelings, because the stronger the economy is, the more money people generally have. And the more money people generally have, the better they feel about their country. So as long as you had something like that, as long as you had something that sounds like that, you hit it right on the money. That is exactly why a growing economy generates good feelings. So we're going to focus more on the economy in the next section in lesson 2. But what I want to look at right now and what this lesson goes on to really focus on is the foreign policy of the United States, or how the United States interacts with other countries. So, like I said earlier in this video, kind of talking about it, the United States, in their eyes, has won the War of 1812. They have signed the Rush-Bagot Agreement. They've signed the Treaty of 1818. They've signed the Adamonis Treaty. All of their borders are secure, so they don't have to worry about another country coming in and invading the United States. But what they do worry about and what they are scared about is Latin America. And Latin America is really trying to take and gain independence, and they are actually successful at gaining independence. Mexico, the largest part of Latin America, largest country in Latin America, is able to gain independence from Spain during Monroe's presidency. And what Americans and the people in the government officials are really worried about is that European countries, after Mexico gains its independence, European countries are going to come in to Latin America, take advantage of the fact that Mexico and other countries are just building their government structures and just setting up their country, and they will try to take it over. They will try to take it away from the people of Mexico. And that's something that the United States doesn't want for 2 reasons. The first reason actually kind of goes and answers the question, why did the United States support Latin American independence? They supported Latin American independence because they saw it as a mirror of the American Revolution. The United States threw off Britain, got rid of Britain, a European power, kicked them out of the United States and established their own country. Mexico is doing the same thing. They're trying to kick Spain, another European country, out of Mexico, and they're trying to create their own country. So the United States kind of sees that as similar, sees the Mexican Revolution as similar to the U.S. Revolution, the American Revolution. So for starters, America sees itself in Mexico, so they're trying to make sure that Mexico can actually gain independence and is able to set up its own government and stuff like that. The other thing that they're worried about is they're afraid that, like I said before, that another European country, after Spain leaves, is going to come into Mexico, take it over, and then right on the doorstep of the United States, you have another European country who then might try to challenge expansion, the United States expansion, or they might try to take away territory from the United States. So these are 2 things that the United States is worried about, and the United States why the United States wants to support the Mexican Revolution and why they want the Mexican Revolution to succeed. So in response to this, President James Monroe issues what's known as the Monroe Doctrine. And he issues the Monroe Doctrine to basically tell other European countries, hey, any issues, anything that happens in Latin America or in the Western Hemisphere, that is our concern alone. Your concerns stop at the Atlantic Ocean. Your concerns, nothing that happens across the Atlantic Ocean in our hemisphere, in the Western Hemisphere, has anything to do with you. You don't have a say in it. It does not concern you. Stay out of it. If you agree to do that, we will stay out of European affairs. We won't involve ourselves with anything that happens in Europe. And we'll kind of just let each other exist and let each other go and kind of help if requested. But we're going to let bygones be bygones. We're going to let you guys do what you need to do so long as you let us do what we need to do. So that is the Monroe Doctrine. That is the promise that James Monroe gives to European countries. If European countries come into the Western Hemisphere and interfere with Mexico, with their building their government and everything else, the United States is going to take and come to Mexico's aid on their behalf. And they're going to, the United States will try to kick out any European country out of Mexico, or out of this hemisphere. So that was the promise that Monroe made. And it was mainly because of the fact that he was afraid that European countries would try to kind of not only take over Mexico, but then use that to take some land that the United States, that was not officially the United States, part of the United States, but was something that the United States was interested in or very close to the United States, that they could then attack the United States. So it's really to kind of protect the United States. That's why Monroe issues this, and that's why Monroe, that's what Monroe is worried about. And it even says right in here, guys, President Monroe became afraid that European countries might try to take control of newly independent Latin American countries. He was also concerned that Russia was interested in the northwest coast of North America. So that's the answer to that question. And those are more specific examples of Monroe being afraid that European countries are going to try to take over Latin America and threaten the United States. So that was the United States foreign policy, a very nationalistic foreign policy. Their goal was to keep other European countries away, keep them in Europe, tell them, hey, stay out of our hemisphere, stay away from us, we will stay away from you, and as long as we see eye to eye on that, we're all set, we won't have any problems. That was the Monroe Doctrine, and that was a kind of the main message of how the United States was going to interact with other foreign nations. Trade was absolutely okay. Interactions or meetings and stuff like that were okay. But if you're going to try to expand and colonize areas in Latin America or areas in North America that are not claimed by us, we're going to have a problem. We're going to have an issue. So that was kind of the stance of the foreign policy of the United States, and it was backed by this sense of nationalism that the people of the United States had. So that was our foreign policy. Our domestic policy, or decisions and laws and policies that we had that applied to the United States itself, that was what Lesson 2 was all about. And it really starts with Henry Clay and the American system. And Henry Clay comes up with this system where he tries to take and strengthen the economy. He wants a national bank. He wants a single currency to encourage interstate trade. He wanted protective tariffs to raise funds to improve roads and canals. So he's looking to really strengthen the economy, strengthen trade, make it easier for people to travel and stuff like that, and travel around the country so that they can buy and sell goods. He's really trying to strengthen the economy, which is in turn going to strengthen the United States and give it a little more power and confidence and stuff like that. And that attempt to strengthen the economy also is really going to give, like we said in Lesson 1 in the first question, it's going to give people more confidence in their country and kind of make them have more loyalty for their country. So that's why the American system, that's the point of the American system, and that's what Henry Clay is trying to do, build the sense of nationalism by strengthening the economy, which gives people more money, which gives them more pride in their nation and more nationalism. So to answer question 1, how might a single currency encourage interstate trade? At this time, every state had a different currency. So if you're going, let's say, from New York to Pennsylvania and you're trying to buy goods, the value of money in each state is different. It's kind of like going between the US and Canada. Right now, the US dollar is worth more than the Canadian dollar. So when you go to exchange money, US dollars for Canadian dollars, you get a little bit more money because the value of the Canadian dollar is less than the value of the American dollar. Same idea with each state having a different currency. If you go into New York, if you're coming from New York State and that dollar is worth more than the Pennsylvania dollar, you're better off. You can take and trade that in and exchange that for Pennsylvania money, and then you have more money to spend, and you can buy those goods much easier. If you are coming from Pennsylvania and you're looking to buy something in New York, it's going to be more expensive because of the fact that the Pennsylvania dollar is worth less. So when you trade in $20, you're going to get less than $20 in New York money because it's worth less. So that's a problem for trade, and it's not going to allow trade to really grow and expand. People are going to stay in New York State, and they're not going to travel to other states if the value of their dollar is less than the value of their neighboring state. So, what Henry Clay is trying to do is eliminate that confusion and expand trade between the states. Because if everybody has the same amount of money, all goods that are bought and sold within the states, not in this case the 50 states, but within the states, are going to be the same. They're going to be an equal. Every good is going to cost the same amount of money. So it's going to make things easier, and it's going to grow and expand trade. So that's why Henry Clay wants a single currency, and why a single currency is going to encourage interstate trade. The value is the same, so you can take and go to any other state and buy a good that you want and not have to worry about having to pay more or less for it. So that's that. That answers that question. With the strengthening of the economy, you start to see a growth of roads and other ways to travel through the different states. A perfect example is the Cumberland Road that stretches from Maryland to Ohio, and then eventually it stretches even further than that when it becomes the National Road. You also have the Erie Canal, which connects Buffalo to Albany, which allows for faster trade. The Erie Canal, you could travel much faster on water than you could on land. So it was much quicker and much cheaper to be able to ship goods on the Erie Canal rather than take them on the different roads that connected the states together. So why were improvements in water transportation so important? Because it says water transportation was often faster, less expensive, and easier than road travel. So the Erie Canal and the Cumberland Road make it easier for people to travel and between states, which makes it easier to trade, which gives people more money, which strengthens the economy. So that is why those advances are fantastic, and those advances helped the United States a lot and really gave people that stronger sense of nationalism. So that takes care of those. We can see how the economy strengthened that sense of nationalism, and we can see how our foreign policy strengthened that sense of nationalism when we basically told Europe, stay out of our hemisphere, we'll stay out of yours. Now, along with that sense of nationalism, we do also see a growth in sectionalism, a growth in pride in your specific section of the country. Sectionalism is really the seeds of the Civil War. It's what is going to kind of create this disunity between the North and the South. So the easiest way to describe sectionalism is really to talk about and look at the North and the South. The South has slaves. The South is agricultural, so they need those slaves. The North is mainly industry. Their economy is based on industry. They don't need slaves. They just need workers. So that issue alone, and the fact that the Constitution didn't resolve it, is going to lead during this era of good feelings to a feeling and a kind of lead to the growth of sectionalism, where Northerners have pride in the North, Southerners have pride in the South, and their interests in what they want are very different. For example, Northerners want tariffs. They want taxes on goods imported or brought into the United States or bought by the United States. Because this way, if there's a tax on goods brought into the United States, that makes foreign goods more expensive and makes U.S. goods less expensive, and people are going to tend to buy the less expensive good. So Southerners, on the other hand, are the ones mainly buying those goods, and they're the ones that are providing the raw materials for those goods, and they don't want to have to take and pay more for those goods, and they feel like those tariffs are really protecting the North at the expense of the South. So Southerners and Northerners really have different interests, and that's what's going to really lead to this idea of sectionalism. Now, there's going to be a point, and we're going to start to see this in what is known as the Missouri Compromise. So, at this time, Missouri wants to come into the Union as a slave state. The problem is that Congress has a perfect balance of power. Right now, at this time, there are 11 free states and 11 slave states. And like I said, they vote differently. They have very different interests. So by making it equal, northern states don't have more power than the southern states, and southern states don't have more power than the northern states. If Missouri comes in as a slave state, that means that slave states will have more power than free states, and northern states do not want that to happen. So they are going to try to put this off until eventually Henry Clay is able to persuade Congress to agree to what is known as the Missouri Compromise. Now, Clay is going to propose that Missouri enters the Union as a slave state and Maine enters the Union as a free state. So you keep that balance of Congress. You keep that balance together so that everybody, so that no one section of the country has more power than the other. There we go, guys. Sorry, my brain just kind of shorted out for a second. So, Missouri comes in as a slave state. Maine comes in as a free state. And you have a balance in Congress. The other part of the Missouri Compromise says that slavery is not going to be allowed north of the 36-degree 30 latitude line. In other words, the southern border of Missouri, everything north of that southern border is free. Everything south of that southern border of Missouri is going to be slave. Missouri is going to be the only slave state north of that line that is going to exist. Every other state north of Missouri's southern border is going to be free, and every state south of that southern border is going to be slave. So it gives both the South and the North something that they want. So it's going to give the North an opportunity to have more free states, and it's also going to give the North a free state to balance out Missouri's slave state. Slave states get Missouri, and they get the opportunity to add more slave states thanks to the Missouri Compromise. So it is a way for both states to win. Now, the thing is, the Missouri Compromise is going to really kind of ease these tensions between the North and the South for a little bit until you get to the 1850s and you get to westward expansion. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Not in a little bit. We're going to talk about that in a couple of units or in a few units. And we'll gain a better understanding of how the kind of killing of the Missouri Compromise is going to cause the Civil War to break out. And we'll see that once we get to the Civil War itself. But the Missouri Compromise is going to really kind of ease those tensions between the two sections of the country. So that's really the importance of the Missouri Compromise. We will definitely come back and talk about the Missouri Compromise and review the Missouri Compromise when we talk about the Civil War. But even in this era of nationalism, even in this era of good feelings, you can see the seeds for disagreement growing between the North and the South and the setup for the Civil War. Okay? So that's the Missouri Compromise. How did Henry Clay help Missouri enter the Union? Missouri entered as a free state, or as a slave state. Missouri entered as a slave state. Maine entered as a free state. excuse me, and all states south of the 3630 latitude line can be slave. All states north of the 3630 latitude line must be free. And it also says it in here, guys, a different way to say it. Let me see. Missouri entered the Union as a slave state. Maine is free. This kept an equal balance in the Senate. Slavery was banned in new territories or states north of Missouri's southern border. So that's where that 3630 line is. That is the southern border of Missouri. So that is how Henry Clay helped Missouri enter the Union. And that answers that question. And that is a description of the Missouri Compromise. So that takes care of that, guys. We talked about nationalism. We talked about that small growth of sectionalism. That is everything I have for today. I hope that was helpful to you guys. I hope that made things clearer. If you have any questions, please make sure you reach out to me during my office hours. With that said, I hope you guys have a fantastically, awesomely stupendous day, and I will catch you guys tomorrow.